Alrighty, hi everyone. Welcome to our next author interview. My name is Maddie. I am the development manager at NaNoWriMo, and I have with me today author Lamar Giles. Lamar, do you want to introduce yourself?
Yeah, I'm Lamar. I've written a number of things between YA and middle grade, several YA mysteries, or YA contemporary, a middle grade series called The Legendary Austin Boys. And I hope to be around long enough to write many more things.
Me too. I love your writing. We're going to talk about one of my favorite books from you a little bit later. But let's kick it off with some more general questions about writing. So can you talk to us a little bit about when you began to write?
Sure. The earliest memories I have of writing, I was a little kid, like 8 years old. It wasn't something that I came to on my own. I had a teacher, and this would have been like third or fourth grade, I think, who insisted that our entire class and really the entire grade participate in something called young authors. And I don't know if that's something that still happens, but essentially everyone gets to write and illustrate their own book.
Oh, that's so
And
cool.
yeah, and it was mind blowing for me because I was already in love with reading, but never considered that I could make up stories. Like I didn't even really understand that real people wrote the books because I grew up in a factory town and I pretty much only knew like my teachers. My mom was a factory worker, no writers. So this idea that I could write and illustrate, I wasn't that great of an artist, my own story was a big deal. And I ended up writing this story called Giant Dinosaur Inside about a kid who pulls like a Godzilla creature out of a cereal box
Oh my gosh.
and ended up winning for my grade.
Oh, wow.
And that was the first time I'd actually ever really been the best at anything, Like my friends were much better athletes. Some of them were musicians and singers, even at that age. I didn't have any of that, but all of a sudden I'm the best writer in my grade.
Oh my
And that was
gosh.
just really encouraging. And I just kind of played with it off and on from that point on and didn't really get really serious until I was a teenager.
Oh, that's incredible. Do you still have the the story that you won?
I don't have the story. I have a picture of the cover that I have
Okay.
shared in presentations that I've done over the years. And
Oh my
so
gosh.
I don't have the story. I do have the cover. And I think at some point I may try to recreate some version of that story as a picture book. I'm not sure when that'll happen, but I would love to do that one day.
Oh, that'd be so cool to see. Oh my gosh. And just
Yeah.
having like such like a roundabout connection to it, like circling back to your very beginning. That's awesome.
Yeah.
Cool. So I guess going into that, if you could tell your younger writing self anything, what would it be?
Um, I would probably tell my younger writer self that it's okay to focus on that thing because, as I said, where I grew up, the big thing was sports and music. Like writing wasn't something that my peers would have really appreciated, and thus I felt a little bit ashamed of it.
Hmm.
If I could go back and talk to myself, then I would say there's really nothing to hide here. It's going to lead to an incredible life. You don't have to be shy about it. When you think about all your friends that are athletes, at the end of the day, you're going to be the one who goes pro.
That's so cool. Oh my God, that's so inspiring too, to like know that if only we could travel back in time and give our past selves a little bit of a boost, that'd be great.
It really would.
Awesome. So, how will you tell us a little bit about your writing process?
Sure. So it's really taken a couple of different forms over the years, and I always think that's important to talk about because there was the process that I had when I still had a day job. When I was working full time, I was a corporate guy for many years, and so being a corporate guy, I was working in a cubicle doing something I pretty much wasn't passionate about, but it paid the bills. I knew I wanted to write. I knew I wanted to publish. So I had to get up every morning at 5 a.m. because I do my best writing early when I have that very new energy of the day. And I will write from 5:30 to about 7:30 every day before I would have to shower, get dressed, and go to the office. And which is exhausting. I'm not gonna lie to you. At the end of the day, I'm completely
Yeah.
wiped out. But I recognized early that if going into the office and doing this thing in my cubicle was difficult and publishing was difficult, I had to put some energy into the difficult thing I wanted to do. And so that was the process for 10 years. I wrote something like 6 or 7 novels during that time. They weren't very good, but they got progressively better. And eventually I ended up writing the novel that would be Fake ID, which was the first young adult novel I sold. So this process started when I was 21. I didn't sell Fake ID until I was 31. So it was a
Wow.
solid decade. Now, after that, I eventually went full-time as a writer. So the process is way different now. I don't get up as early.
That's good.
Which is great. And I treat it very much like I treated my day job for many years. So I try to be at my desk around 8:30 or so. That's about the time my wife and my daughter have left for the day. My daughter's going to daycare. My wife's going to her job. And so I try to get to my desk at 8:30, work on new stuff till about noon, take a lunch break. In the afternoon is either going to be trying to revise something that needs to go out or doing some of the boring business stuff that now comes with the job. And I try to be done unless there's something pressing by about 5 o'clock. So I try to treat it like a day job. And unless I'm just really into a project, I try not to work on the weekends now. I try to keep that separation and still, I think it's important to still live life. I piled on writing for many years to get here. Now I think it's okay to take a little bit of a break and enjoy the time off.
Yeah, because you obviously you worked for it and then you earned it. So you gotta both like design your own schedule, which sounds way more fun than doing a 9 to 5 at some little desk every day. And then you get to enjoy the benefits. That's fantastic. So kind of going more into detail on that, can you talk to us a little bit about how you usually plan and write a novel?
Sure. And this changed a little bit when I started doing it full time. Initially, I guess I was what you would call a pantser. I would just see what happens, and that's fun. I love writing like that. It can be challenging in revision because it's a lot to change. But that was a super fun way for me to write. But once I got into the business, it became a little bit different because once you're in and you make connections, you have the ability to sell books you haven't written yet. The thing is, you have to sell those on proposal, meaning you probably have to have some sort of detailed synopsis in order to entice the editor and give them something to work with when they go to their acquisition meeting. So this made a necessity to start thinking about the novel from beginning to end very early. And it can start with a sentence or two. My novel Overturned, for example, I think the first sentence might have been a young poker player must solve a murder in Las Vegas. That's it. And then it becomes building on that. So then it becomes a paragraph of what that book could be about. So something similar to what you would see on a jacket when you're picking up a book in the bookstore. And then from there, I'm building out the detailed synopsis. And I always go into it saying I'm only going to do a 5-page synopsis. But every proposal I've sold has been about 13 to 15 pages of synopsis. Like it just grows and grows. And that's tedious. It takes a while, but it makes things a little bit easier when the novel sells and I actually have to draft it because I know many of the beats. Some things may change, but not a ton. And the bonus is someone's already signed off on that plot. So there's not going to be too much objection in the edit.
Very cool. Oh my gosh. And this is a question I ask a lot of authors I interview. So I love seeing what stays the same from certain authors, what's different. And everyone's always a little bit different, but there's always like a thread of similarities. So that's really fantastic to hear. I think you touched on this a little bit. Did publishing your first book like significantly change your writing process?
It changed it in the way I talked about, but also you sort of become more market minded in the sense that you understand that an editor has to be able to go into a room of other editors and be able to convince them that this is something that's going to sell. That's not anything I really thought about before I really got in the business. Like it started to become clearer to me as years went on and I was going through the querying process and getting rejections. I started to understand some parts of it, but when you're in it, you really do understand that it's a business and you're not always writing things the exact way you would write them if nobody else had to sign off on it. And so that's something that's very different from when I was a kid, teenager, or even in my early 20s, just writing whatever I wanted to write, however I wanted to write it. Like there are other factors involved. And I'll give you an example. I've published 2 books with Scholastic, and I got a book coming out in the fall from them. Those books don't have any curse words in them.
Oh.
And it's not that I don't curse, because you've read some stuff I've written that has cursing in
Oh
it.
yeah.
But that particular publisher has found that without curse words, it's easier to get those books to more people.
Oh.
And it doesn't change the story. It doesn't change the fundamentals. You can still write about anything you want to write, but just the fact of not having curse words removes a barrier that will prevent some readers from getting that book.
Wow. It's the little things that you just don't think about, that like it's just kind of there, and then there's a whole world that's like, nope, can't do this.
Yeah. I mean, like I said, that comes back to the business side of things. And here's the thing about it. It's not like I couldn't put curse words in. I have the freedom to dictate those things, but it became clear early on in working with that publisher how beneficial it was to try to avoid it. And so for them, I just do that. And then it works, you know?
Yeah. I mean, 3 books with them, obviously it works.
Yeah. And I love working with them. Like they're one of my favorite publishers to work with. I've published with several so far. And I love working with Scholastic. It's just when, it's a business, and you realize that little things like that can have huge effects long term.
For sure. So it looks like we have a question from someone in the audience. When you first started out, did you rely on a friend or someone to read your work? And this is from Kate Lima.
Oh, hi. Good question, Kate. Not friends. And I'll say that because the people I was friends with, or am friends with, they don't know this world that much. So them being friends, if they read something I was writing early, they were almost universally encouraging. There was no feedback to work with to improve the work. So what I had to do was seek out writers groups. And this was in the early 2000s, stumbling upon a lot of online groups. Most of them didn't work for me. What I found was an in-person chapter of Sisters in Crime, which is a group that focuses on mystery thrillers. There was a local chapter that met at my library, like 2 miles from my house, every month. I joined them, and we would critique each other's works because we all had similar goals. And I found that to be much more beneficial than letting my friends read things, because my friends are just going to encourage you and try to,
You would hope so, right?
Yeah. They're being friendly,
Yeah.
but that's not necessarily what you need at that point in your development.
Absolutely. Awesome. Thanks, Kate. Great question. All righty. So moving slightly away from writing, not really, I guess. Do you believe in writer's block?
Personally, I don't have a problem with it. I don't want to say I don't believe in it, because I know some people struggle with it. But what I think is there are times that are where it's harder to write than others. And I think it's just something where you're pre-rejecting yourself. Like, I think writer's block is a form of, I don't think the sentence I'm going to write will be good, so I might as well not write it. The thing is, it might not be good. You could write a whole book that's not good, but the part of the job is getting it down and fixing it.
Yep.
Not stopping yourself from writing. You can't be a writer who's afraid to write. I mean, it's just not going to work. Or rather, you can be afraid to write, but you got to work past it, because I get scared too.
Yeah.
I've been doing this almost 30 years, and still am nervous with new stuff. I think it's going to be the thing that people don't like, that I'm going to get, panned in reviews, and that could happen. But that's a part of the job you just have to accept. And I always feel like you can get a sentence down. And I learned this trick a long time ago when you're struggling. And I've taught this to many kids across the country. It's super simple if you're just feeling like I can't get anything down. You set a timer for 1 minute, pick a random letter of the alphabet, and just take that minute and try to write as many words as you can to begin with that letter. You do that 3 times in a row with different letters. And after the 3rd time, you just immediately try to write whatever it was you were struggling with. And a lot of times that can unlock a little bit of the anxiety and apprehension.
Oh my gosh, I'm going to try that after this. That sounds so fun.
Yeah. It's a neat little trick. I taught it to students when I was working for universities, and not just for creative writing. Like it helped with like having to write papers that were due for science classes. And so yeah, it's a little something that can help.
Cool. Awesome. I'm absolutely gonna, because I have a story I'm working on. It's been stuck for a while. I'm gonna try that after I get done with work today.
Yeah, go for it.
Awesome. So can you talk to me a little bit about what's the worst piece of writing advice you have ever received, and how would you revise it to make it a little better?
Okay, so the worst piece of writing advice is really very specific to me. So I don't know how much this will help when I tell you what it is. Very early on in my career, I had someone come up to me and say, "Hey, you're Black. If you want to succeed, you need to write erotica or street lit, because no one's going to read your stuff otherwise." And that advice is BS. And my revision would be to throw that advice and that person in the trash.
Throw them in the trash. Yeah, it's terrible advice. My God.
It's terrible. It's horrendous advice. I don't know how applicable that would be to everyone else. If we're looking for a piece of bad advice that you might revise, I would say that universal show don't tell thing. Sometimes you can show and not tell. It just becomes what the difference is. You just have to do this enough where you can recognize the difference. And understand that like there's almost no advice that's completely 100% right all the time. If you write enough and experiment enough, you can find ways to break rules in creative ways that work.
Very cool. Yeah, awesome. Let's see here. So a lot of our writers are currently participating in Camp NaNoWriMo going on right now. Is there a piece of advice, continuing on our little advice train, that you want to give to folks who are writing and or editing this month?
Yeah. I would say savor this time and don't beat yourself up. Like if you're having a great day, enjoy that day. If you're having a writing day that's a little tough, don't beat yourself up, because the goal is to have many writing days throughout your life. Some of them are going to be better than others. Respect the fact that you've taken on this tough challenge by even making the attempt, and know that makes you more of a badass than most.
Absolutely. I think that's great. Yeah. Right. Enjoy it. Because what else are you going to do, right?
Yeah.
If you don't enjoy it. Fantastic. Now, finally, moving to something that you've been involved in. For anyone who doesn't know, you are one of the co-founders of the nonprofit We Need Diverse Books, who's actually a really great friend and partner to NaNoWriMo. Can you talk to me a little bit about how the nonprofit came about?
Sure. So We Need Diverse Books is the brainchild of Ellen O. If you don't know Ellen O, she writes these really great fantasy novels, contemporary novels, and she is Korean American. And I remember my very first book event, I got to meet her and Meg Medina, who would go on to win the Newbery Medal.
Oh, wow.
Like we were all together and we were talking about how growing up, we didn't see a lot of books that had people like us in it, and we wanted to contribute, and our publishers weren't being very supportive. And Ellen goes, "I got an idea. I'm working on something. Let me think about it, but I want you all involved." And she wouldn't give us any details at first, so we were just like, "As long as it's legal, Ellen, we're in. As long as you're not robbing banks." And she eventually, a couple weeks later, came back. She's like, "I just want to do a hashtag. We need diverse books to let people know," because she's like, "I think a lot of people have the same sort of story we had." And we talked about how, we might launch that. It just so happened to be at a time when one of the industry's biggest events, which was BookCon at the time, announced their children's authors superstar lineup. I forgot exactly how they phrased it, but it was supposed to be like the best writers working in children's fiction. And it was 40 writers, all white, and Grumpy Cat.
Oh, what? No.
I just remember seeing a crazy graphic of everybody's face in this cat. And Ellen pretty much said, "Hey, now's the time." And so it started on Twitter. We were all telling stories. It immediately started to trend. And then it started to trend like for a ridiculously long time. And then it's trending all over the world. And it becomes this huge thing that no one saw coming. And in the wake of it, BookCon reached out to us to come to the conference and do a panel talking about how it all came about. And so we all went to New York to this conference. We did this panel, standing room only, 300 people crammed in a room that's only supposed to hold like 250. Afterwards, every media outlet's interviewing us. I got interviewed by NPR that day.
Oh my gosh.
It was such a big deal that Ellen was like, we can't let it just fade after this. And that was the genesis of the nonprofit. And since then, we've gone on to develop several programs to try to help change the face of publishing. So, you know, there's school programs that will bring authors to classrooms along with free books for kids. There's awards programs like the Walter Award to recognize creators that might not have gotten recognition otherwise. We have internship programs, we have mentorship programs. Diversebooks.org is the website. So you can see all that stuff listed there. And full disclosure, we started in 2014. I left my leadership position in 2018 just because my schedule no longer allowed for me to do it. But I was there for 4 years. It's still being run by an incredible group. So anyone who's interested, you can go to the website and see a bunch of the stuff they're doing.
Yeah, it's a fantastic org. I only found out that you were one of the co-founders after we had asked you to interview. So I was like, oh my gosh, like we have to ask him about this. So that's one, a fantastic story that I had not heard before. And two, it really is a great organization. Everyone should go check it out, see all the stuff that's on there. I thought it was a much older organization because of like how well established it is and how like many people know about it. I didn't realize it was as young as it is. So all fantastic stuff.
And time's funny now anyway. We were talking about that before, right? Because I was like, when I told you I left in 2018, I was really about to say I left 2 years ago and it's 4 years ago because time doesn't make any sense anymore.
It's so true. It's so true. I'm like, when was that? Was that a year ago? Was that 3 years ago? Was that 10 years ago? I was telling someone when I graduated from high school and I was like, oh, it was then. So like it wasn't that long ago. And I was like, oh no, wait, that was a very long time ago.
And I'm willing to bet it was much, much longer for me. So
probably. Time flies.
It does.
Awesome. Well, we're going to move into one of my favorite books from you, Not So Pure and Simple. For the viewers who have not read this novel, one, you totally should. But can you tell us what Not So Pure and Simple is about?
Yeah, in a nutshell, Not So Pure and Simple is about a boy who accidentally joins a purity pledge at church to get closer to a girl he likes and ends up sort of kicking this hornet's nest of controversy in his small town.
It's fantastic. We'll get into it. You'll see how much I'm excited about this book and how much I love it as we go into these questions. But can you talk to us a little bit about what inspired you to write Not So Pure and Simple?
Sure. Two things really. One of them is sort of silly and kind of like and another one is very serious. The first piece had to do with my wife and I attending a church service maybe 15 years ago. It was in the summer, and we sat in front of these three boys who were loudly boasting about their sexual experience. Some of it might have been lies, but one boy is sitting there talking about like how his mom walked in on him and his girlfriend, and his friends are like high-fiving him. They're being really like insufferable guys. And my wife's sitting there squeezing my hand the whole time, like can't believe they just don't care. They don't know it, so they don't care that they're talking all loud. But the thing that was sort of like the funny twist was a deacon comes up to the pulpit and says, anyone who's in the summer's sexual purity program, please get up and leave to go to youth church. And all three of these boys get up and go.
Oh my gosh.
And I just couldn't believe it. Like my wife and I were just completely stunned. And it's something that stuck with me for a very long time. And so I was in an MFA program several years ago, and I needed to write something for the program that was very different from what I'd published because I'd already had 2 books out. And so this idea came back to me, and it became the seed of Not So Pure and Simple. I never thought I would finish it. I thought I was just doing it for school. But I graduated from an MFA program in 2017. And this is the serious part that made me want to finish. That fall, the Me Too movement exploded. And as I was sitting there, the hashtags going crazy, I'm reading all these accounts of horrible things that happened to women, I felt as if a fog had been pulled away. Like I just didn't know. I was a typical guy in that moment where I just did not understand how many bad things had happened to women, usually perpetrated by men. And in that moment, I started talking to my wife about it. I'm talking to my mom, I'm talking to my sister, I'm talking to friends. And I'm really like, what can I do? And the thing that came back over and over was, you need to talk to men because men don't seem to listen to us. Now, I've certainly tried to have those conversations with men in my circle, but that's a very limited circle. But it occurred to me I had this vehicle in this book I started that maybe could help other people have that conversation all across the country. And that inspired me to finish Not So Pure and Simple.
That's fantastic. It's such like it really is reflective of how relevant it is to our world, the themes of the book, the things that Dell goes through, all of this stuff is just so pertinent to what everyone goes through, I think. So talking a little bit more about what goes on in the novel, something that feels very challenging, just kind of in general, is merging social media with the written word, especially in novels, because, social media is often very visual and novels, are just words. But I think Not So Pure and Simple really melds these two words together incredibly well. Can you talk to us about how you went about kind of blending those two together?
Sure. So I think in Not So Pure and Simple, the main platforms that we see are YouTube
Mhm.
and Instagram.
Yeah.
I think if I was writing today, TikTok would probably get in there a little bit too. And I think the way I went about it is I recognize that these are, especially at the time I was drafting, these are ways that a lot of people communicate with large audiences. I also recognize I wasn't that proficient with either. So the thing I tried to do was just use them in moderation. So Not So Pure and Simple is probably a little bit over 300 pages. I would wager the social media instances that actually appear on the page are probably less, or probably around 5 to 10 pages of the 300.
Oh, wow.
And so it just became a matter of trying to strategically place them in ways that made them seem bigger than they probably actually were, which would, I think, is more effective, and it doesn't expose me as much as someone who's talking about this stuff and maybe doesn't understand it as well as people who are really great at it. I
Wow.
think, yeah, I was just gonna say, I, I think if I were to overuse it, it would have hurt the book. I think there are people who are very talented who can do stuff like that. Joe Hill has a story called Twittering from the Circus of the Dead, where the whole story is tweets.
Oh my gosh.
And
Wow.
it's great. I mean, everything he does is great, but I think what works there is that it's a short story,
Mm.
and it's him. Like, I don't know if I could pull that off. It's certainly not long form, so I think moderation is key.
Yeah, I didn't realize that it was such a small piece of the book, because I do think that, like, even though it's 5-10 pages, for me, it really feels like it takes up a lot of the second half of the book. So that's really incredible. So going into Dell, the main character of the book, one of my favorite things about reading first person point of view is that the main character's voice is often so strong, and I think Dell's is no exception. So can you talk to us about how you went about creating Dell's voice?
Sure. Dell's voice, and I think any of the characters' voices in my books, a lot of it just comes from me trying to pay particular attention to young people I'm around. So that could be holiday dinners with cousins, particularly when I used to travel a lot. Like, there hasn't been much of that since the pandemic started, and I've missed this a great deal. But I would usually be in schools all across the country and get to sit down, have lunch, talk to people who are significantly younger than me, and I would try to pay attention to the cadence and vocabulary and try to just keep that stuff in mind when I sit down and put a character on the page. But the thing I want to express here to anybody who's listening is, like, every character should just sound like themselves. And so that could really mean that they could sound, they could have a really expansive vocabulary, or they could speak with a British accent while they live in Alabama. Who knows? Like, if you can justify the character's behavior and use whatever situation you're writing to help feed that voice, like, it's going to make anything sound unique. Your character is your character. And like the key, and I think like if you look across all my books, there are no main characters that sound the same, even though I've pretty much done them the same way.
Huh. Oh, that's so cool. I'm gonna go back and reread again all of them and then compare, because that's really cool. That's really fascinating. That it's like you can do the same thing but have incredibly different results across the board.
Yeah, like anything in the environment can help dictate what that voice is. The burgers they like to eat, the TV shows they watch with their parents, if they do that at all. Like it becomes you do it enough where you just instinctively know they sound correct now.
You step into their shoes completely and you're walking as them. Oh, that's awesome.
It really becomes a situation of Dell would say this, but not that.
Yeah. Very cool. Oh my gosh. So kind of going into Dell's character a little bit more, at the beginning of the novel, Dell holds beliefs that the narrative doesn't necessarily agree with. And especially in first person point of view, I think it's really difficult to separate main character beliefs and narrative beliefs when they clash. Obviously, we can't just state outright that like the main character believes something different than the narrative. That's just going to pull our readers out of the novel. But can you talk to us about that nuance and how you kind of delineated between Dell's beliefs and the narrative's beliefs so clearly?
Sure. I think the key to that, and I did something like this in my second novel, Endangered, when I have a character who's doing something wrong, but I sort of want you to agree with them, is you give them something that they and the reader agree with. So another way to put it is you give them a common enemy. So even if this character is wrong and doing stuff that you may not like, both you and the character agree in Not So Pure and Simple, for example, that Pastor Newsom and the church teachings are troubling.
Okay.
So from the very beginning, you and Dell are on the same page about that. And because Dell is also like, he's like a likable guy,
Yes.
I mean, the things he says and thinks, you may give him a pass for because of his youth in the beginning. And so therefore you're giving him a pass because he's young. And you also agree with him that this thing happening over here is wrong. And you're midway through the book before you start to realize that Dell's thinking intertwines with that thing you thought was wrong. And then you're 3/4 of the way through when you realize Dell's a bigger perpetrator as anybody. And at that point, you're like, Dell better get his stuff together, or I may not like him by the end. By that point, if I've done my job, you are hooked. And you had a point where you have to consider, I really like this guy who believes this wrong thing. And do I in some way believe the wrong thing? Thus, again, I hope these are the sort of conversations this book would generate in the hands of other readers.
Oh yeah, absolutely. I think it's something that because you like the character by that point when you realize, oh wait, there's something going on that might not be okay. But at that point, you want him to learn that thing. And so you want to keep reading to make sure, okay, like I want you to know this thing. I want you to get a little bit better, get a little bit smarter. Please get there. So that gets you to the end. Yeah. All right. So one of the things that I really, really loved about Not So Pure and Simple were just the amount of twists. Even in the purity pledge part, like I remember reading that for the first time and just kind of being like so taken aback by it and be like, oh my gosh, oh no, what's he gonna do about this? And I feel like twists seem easier to write and reveal in different genres like mystery and suspense. But like I said, I felt like twists caught me a whole bunch of turns in this book. Can you talk to us about how you went about creating these twists in a genre that's maybe not necessarily known for them?
Well, I don't think I went in intentionally doing that. You have to keep in mind that by the time I started writing Not So Pure and Simple, I'd published 2 mystery thrillers and was working on a third. And so I was sort of in that mode while trying to write this thing for school. And I think some of that just sort of like overlap. And so where I was writing this other thing for work where it was like twist, kidnappers, twist, a body, I immediately had to switch to twist, he's the baby father. Twist, she has a completely different taste in guys than we thought. I don't know. I think it worked out well. I don't think I could have gone in and made it happen on purpose if not for having to switch gears the way I was. But on some level, I think most novels probably have moments like that make you stick around into the end. Like every story is a mystery until you finish it. I think just some are more overt guilty.
I think that was honestly one of my favorite things about the book. I was like, oh my gosh, like what is going to happen next? Like I had no idea. It was great. So yes, that is my big pitch for everyone watching. Please go read Not So Pure and Simple. It's fantastic. You're going to burn through it. Thank you for writing it. I loved it.
Thank you. Thank you. I'm glad you enjoyed.
So moving into some other stuff that you've written, you have a really long backlist of books that are really quite different from one another, from genre to age range to topic. Do you have one in particular that was your favorite to write?
Not one. Can I name three? And
yes, of course.
So, I mean, it's always like picking between your kids. But if I had to pick three, I would say Spin, Not So Pure and Simple, and The Last Day of Summer, because I think those three represent the very high watermarks in my genre divergence. And so they're the books. So Spin is like, I think I was probably at my best writing mysteries. And then I switched to contemporary with Not So Pure and Simple, and I think it turned out well. And then I'm also tried to write middle grade fantasy, and I think that turned out well too. And so I just think those are really the signs of my achievements moving between spaces.
Very cool. Oh my gosh, I love it. Is there a genre or topic that you want to write, but you haven't gotten the chance to yet?
I love to write a really trippy sci-fi based thriller. Ooh. In the vein of like Blake Crouch's work. I just love the idea of these far out science concepts, but I'm intimidated. So this is me being afraid. I'm intimidated because I'm a casual observer of them. I'm not a scientist. I didn't study science. And so if there's anyone out there who's afraid to take a crack at something, know that 3 decades into this, I still feel those fears.
But even when I'm sure you will write that someday, even when you do, I think what has happened from your mystery to contemporary, I think those two genres will then transfer to sci-fi and you'll get some sort of like totally brand new thing. So I'm already excited for your sci-fi.
I hope so. I'm going to keep your kind words in mind when I make that attempt. Thank you.
Of course. So your next novel comes out in September. I'm super excited for it. It's called The Getaway. Can you talk to us a little bit about what it's about?
Yeah, The Getaway is my attempt at speculative horror. And it's essentially me having a little bit of a thought experiment around the question of what if Disney World were a secret doomsday bunker? It's a book that was born of my paranoia over the current state of the world, whether that's environmentally, the way society is, or the way economics are. I wanted to create this sort of microcosm to explore what powerful people might do when they have nothing to lose, but also still want the comforts that they are accustomed to. It's told from the perspective of a young resort worker who is tasked with providing the stellar customer service through what is essentially the apocalypse.
Oh my goodness. Oh, wow. Yes, I'm super excited for that. You can pre-order it now on your website for anyone who is also interested. I'm a huge Disney fan, so that just like anything pitched with Disney or Disney World, Disneyland in it, that's got me hooked already.
I was nervous to even say the D word because this has to do. I worked at Disney World. I worked and lived at Disney World 22 years ago.
Oh wow.
I spent a semester there. And, we had to sign all this paperwork, just a bunch of stuff you're not supposed to talk about. But I noticed now that people who are going through the same program, like they have whole YouTube channels where they're detailing like how that program is now.
Oh, wow.
So, I mean, I don't know. I don't know if that's sanctioned, if Disney just enjoys but I was nervous to even mention that I was there because I'm still in that mindset of I can't talk about any of it. And to be clear, this is not Disney World in the book. It's a park that was created by a man who very much admired Walt Disney.
Oh, okay. So Disney doesn't come after you for making Disney World.
Don't sue me. Bunker. Don't sue me, Mickey.
All right, awesome. Well, I have a little game based on the Getaways, not like the premise, but like theme parks in general. So I have like a little 6-question quiz game. I'm going to share my screen so we can take a look.
Sure.
And okay, so 6 questions in general about theme parks, not just Disney World, just kind of theme parks overall. So first question, where is the oldest operating theme park located? Switzerland, Denmark, Canada, Germany.
Do I guess aloud? Is that
yes, you can guess. Okay. I mean, if you want to, yeah. I know the answer.
I'm going to go with Switzerland.
It is Denmark.
Oh.
So the oldest operating amusement park opened in 1583. I cannot say this name, so that is the name of the theme park.
Yeah, I don't get it.
I have a friend who knows Danish, but I am not that person. It drew crowds because it had water, and then the water drew entertainers and vendors, and then it became an amusement park just because there was fresh water there.
Oh, wow.
It's currently the 2nd most popular tourist attraction in Denmark after another amusement park called Tivoli Gardens.
Oh, very nice.
Yeah. The next question, when Disneyland opened in 1955, what year was Tomorrowland supposed to depict? 2001, 3000, 1986, 1995?
I think it was 2001.
It was actually 1986, which sounds like so long ago. It's just like the farther we get into the future, the sillier that is.
But you know, it's bad though, because I should know this from my training from 22 years ago, because I worked in the Magic Kingdom and I often had to go through Tomorrowland. So another reason that Disney should not sue me. I don't remember any of the secrets, really.
Yeah, see, you don't know anything. You all made it up just for your novel. But actually, when Tomorrowland opened, it was kind of just like a giant commercial for companies. So companies like Monsanto, American Odors, Richfield Oil, and Dutch Boy Paint were just some of the few who opened and sponsored attractions in Tomorrowland, which is not quite too different from today, but there's certainly less company-only sponsored stuff. All right, true or false? Theme parks are the 2nd largest explosive buyer in the U.S.
I want to say that's false, but I'm worried it's true.
50-50 chance.
Yeah, I'm going to say true. I'll go true.
It is true. Yeah. So fireworks are considered explosives. So that makes Disney World the 2nd biggest explosive buyer in the U.S. right after the government. The estimates, even though it's never been released, range from $45,000 to $50,000 per fireworks show. So that's a lot of fireworks.
And that sounds about right. That sounds about right. And that's nightly. So yeah.
That's a lot of explosions. Yeah. All right. So next one, Ferris wheels were invented in which century? 16th, 17th, 18th, or 19th?
I'm gonna go with 16th. It seems like that seems like the sort of thing where you'd be like, I can't believe it was made that early.
Right. It is the 17th century, which is like still, what is that? The 1600s still, I think?
Yes.
Yeah. So before the Ferris wheel existed as we know it today, it was created in Bulgaria and was called what translates to the pleasure wheel. And these pleasure wheels had chairs suspended from rings, and then it was pulled by like guys, like really strong dudes. So I couldn't find any pictures because I guess that was a really long time ago. I'm sure there's recreations somewhere, but yeah, that's where Ferris wheels came from. Right?
That would be neat to see.
Disney can remake that. Okay, another true or false question. The world's most expensive roller coaster cost $100 million to build.
That sounds true. I'll say true.
It is true.
Yeah.
So it's not like the fanciest or the tallest or the fastest, but Expedition Everest at Disney World was the world's most expensive roller coaster because they recreated Mount Everest in miniature. So similar to the Matterhorn, it's Mount Everest in miniature. And I think that's the one where you like go backwards at some point. I've not been on that one.
The strange thing about it is, considering just the dollar figures we see in the news and the world now, $100 million doesn't even sound that expensive for the stuff that happens these days, you know?
Right? Yeah. And I know like Disneyland Shanghai has like the most technologically advanced stuff. So I wonder if there's like just kind of like a ride that's now cost more than $100 million.
I would not be shocked.
Yeah. Wow. It's amazing. All right. How fast does the world's fastest roller coaster go? 150, 160, 170, or 180?
I'll go 170.
It is, I don't even remember. It's 150. So Ferrari World in Abu Dhabi is a theme park for Ferrari. So it kind of makes sense that they would have the world's fastest theme park. It's called the Formula Rossa, and it goes 0 to 150 in 5 seconds, which is very, very fast.
That is very, very fast. I'm not one that's scared to ride things, but you know, as I'm getting into my old age, I don't know if I want to take a chance on that one.
Right? It was just, I can't even like imagine just like how hard you're pulled back in your seat from that push.
Yeah, I'm good. Okay,
I think that was our last question. But I did see, let me stop sharing my screen because I think I saw one more question come in from the audience.
sure.
Also from Kate Lima. Did you have parents that supported your writing efforts? You have wonderful self-confidence.
Yeah, my mom didn't necessarily understand it, but she was always like, what do you need? Her whole thing was she didn't want her kids to work in a factory. That's what she did for 32 years. So she always told us to work on our mind, because if we worked on our mind, when it was our turn to earn a living, at least we could have air conditioning. And so this was early 90s when I first started to get serious as a teenager. This was before many people had computers in their homes. My mom bought a computer for our home and put it in my bedroom. She said it was for homework, but you can do your other things with it too.
Oh, that's so incredible. Oh my gosh.
Mm-hmm.
How cool. Well, that's a wonderful thing to leave off on for today. Work on your minds, everybody. Lamar, thank you so much for joining us today. This was super fun to get to talk to you and get to hear a little bit more about your background and experience in books. I also want to thank Catherine, who's been working behind the scenes and producing this for us today. So thank you, Catherine. And of course, thank you to all of our monthly donors, whether you're watching this live or you're watching this at a later date. These are happening because of you. So thank you so much for your support. And